Hamas and Israel have reached a truce that potentially averted another war in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is calling the ceasefire a success for the liberation movement, but the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank says the deal is a trap, carefully laid by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. TRT World goes one-on-one with Chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat. Thank you so much for speaking to TRT World. Is the recent truce between Hamas and Benjamin Netanyahu's government a success for the Palestinians?
I believe the cessation of the Israeli aggression against our people in Gaza is a success. Saving the lives of Palestinians is a success. Stopping another massacre that was planned by the Israelis against Gaza is a success. We have exerted every possible effort. President Abbas called President Erdogan, President Sisi, many others in the Western world in order to see to it that we prevent another massacre against our civilians in Gaza.
But it was Hamas that took the lead.
Hamas controls Gaza. There is a coup d'etat in Gaza. Hamas took a coup d'etat in Gaza and still in full control of Gaza.
Now this is a territory, this is a small strip of land that is disconnected from the West Bank. There is no connection physically between Gaza and the West Bank. Hamas, as you say, is in control of Gaza, but Gaza is also surrounded by Israel, by Egypt, a blockade, nothing coming in, very limited.
We have to begin with ourselves. If we don't help ourselves as Palestinians, nobody else will.
Okay, so how can the Palestinian Authority help
We need to
Gaza?
We have the Americans this year, 2018, cut $844 million of their aid to us, including to our hospitals, including to our infrastructure projects, including to UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Agency for the Refugees. So our total budget monthly now is $196 million. 100 million are spent in the West Bank, and 96 million we spend in Gaza.
But they haven't received the money.
They receive $96 million a month. I challenge anyone who says otherwise.
They say that the Palestinian Authority has stopped.
I'm just telling you numbers. We have had $844 million of American aid totally cut to punish us because we refused that they moved their embassy to Jerusalem and recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, to cancel their consulate in East Jerusalem, to close our office, the PLO office in Washington, to consider us a terrorist organization as the PLO, and then to cut the aid from UNRWA, to cut the aid infrastructure from USAID. And in spite of all of this, our total budget, with the support from the Arabs, the Europeans, and the taxes we collect, is $196 million. This is November 2018.
It feels like you're under siege.
And we pay.
It feels like you're under siege.
We spend $100 million in the West Bank and $96 million in Gaza. We are under siege in the West Bank and in Gaza. We're under occupation.
So you should sympathize and empathize with Hamas's position.
Hamas is a Palestinian political party. And when we differ, we go back to ballots and not bullets. And Hamas must understand the difference between political pluralism and authority pluralism. All right? There is not a single family without a martyr, without a jailed person, without somebody is injured. We are in common struggle and we're under occupation. And if we don't help ourselves as Palestinians, nobody else will. We have signed an agreement with Hamas on October 12th, 2017 in Cairo. And then this agreement was ratified by all Palestinian factions, including Jihad, PFLP, DFLP, everybody. The question today to Hamas, why are you not implementing the agreement? It says article number 1.
Hamas says it has priorities. It is trying to raise the issue of the Palestinian suffering in Gaza through this march, through these demonstrations, by supporting these demonstrations, standing up to the Israeli siege.
But aren't they better off to stand for the Israelis if we're united?
How can you unite?
By Hamas accepting to have one government, the rule of law. By Hamas accepting to agree and implement what they signed on. What does it say, the agreement? We formed a national consensus government. in 2014. You know with whom? Each single minister in that government was picked by Hamas and Fatah. Consensus. All right? So let this government, the article number 1 saying, hold its responsibility in Gaza as much as it does in the West Bank, in accordance with our laws. Precisely. So I urge you, Ali, to read the October 12, 2017 agreement. Let us deal with facts. Let us not deal with slogans and emotions and affiliations. Let us deal with facts.
Well, the facts are... Let's look at the facts. 70% of the population, Palestinian population in the occupied territories in Gaza, is below the age of 30. The leadership, on the other hand, Mahmoud Abbas, is in his 80s. Do you think there is a disconnect between the Palestinian leadership as is and a younger population that maybe identifies more with groups like Hamas?
That's what we're asking Hamas. Ballots. The main agreement of 12th of October says that once the national consensus government join the ministries, join the people, so on, we go to ballots, we go to elections. And every time a Palestinian ran for elections, including Arafat, we had 5 to 6 candidates running. All right? And in 2006, Hamas won the election against my party. So why, if they claim that there is disconnect between us and our people and so on, why don't they accept to go back to elections? And they can bring whoever observers from earth. They know that we do good elections, decent elections, fair elections. So when you differ, we go back to ballots. That's what we're saying, Hamas. We're not excluding Hamas. We cannot exclude Hamas. We're telling Hamas, act as such. You just cannot take over by military means. That's as simple as that. We're under occupation in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem and in Gaza. There is nothing to fight about. There is nothing to fragment ourselves about. There is nothing to waste our efforts about.
But the truce is a success.
And we have done everything humanly possible to make the truce. We want to save lives of Palestinians.
And now Hamas is saying with Lieberman's departure, that's also being hailed as a success.
Okay.
And
what's next?
The Israelis are saying.
What's next?
Next
for me,
is
I
that,
don't.
Hamas
For me as a
brought into
Palestinian,
the fold.
why can't they accept to implement the agreement and rejoin forces together with their people, with all parties, and let all parties go to elections? What's wrong with that? And if they say that they have the upper hand and they have the support of the young and so on, they may win, crush us again and take over. Why can't they do that? We're not trying to isolate Hamas. Nobody can. And nobody can isolate me.
So
right?
Normalize them. Accept them.
I signed with them an agreement that they drafted.
All right, let's try to bring it together. You have this truce. You have a government in Israel which is increasingly weak or looking weakened with the departure of Lieberman, the prospect of early elections. Where does this all head in the next 6 months to the next year, this situation?
You have to keep in mind that this government of Israel came down simply because it's the most extremist government in Israel's history. Lieberman did not like the fact that he killed 14 Palestinians and wounded 200 in 20 hours. He wanted to kill 140 maybe and 2,000. So there is this race among Israelis who harms and who kills more Palestinians with their F-15s, F-16s. So don't make it look like there are two armies equal facing each other. All right?
We see that with the Gaza protests.
Israel is a country with 3,000 fighting planes, 5,000 tanks, and nuclear weapons, and bullying Gaza, the mostly densely populated areas on earth, with mostly killing civilians, massacring civilians. Since March 2018 till now, we have 25,000 Palestinians martyred or wounded, 8,000 of which are maimed by Israelis. So the Israeli government came down because the war criminals in that government were not satisfied with the numbers of Palestinians they're massacring.
And now Netanyahu is a peacemaker.
Now he wants to look like he's a war criminal in terms of his massacres against Gaza and the settlement activities and the ongoing.
But he has averted the prospect of.
I cannot stand guards on his lips. But I'm telling you, the competition between Israelis now is who will kill more Palestinians. Prime Minister Netanyahu is not a two-stater. Ideologically speaking, he is against the two-state solution, and he promised when Oslo agreements. I've known him for 31 years. The man is not a two-stater. The man will do everything in his power to destroy the two-state solution, and he is doing a good job. The man hallucinates about Arab and Muslim countries normalizing with Israel, and I dare him, I challenge him to show me an Arab country that will open an embassy in Israel or to have its embassy open, other than the countries that have already relations, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan, because of the peace treaties between these two countries and them.
But he's a peacemaker in this current truce.
He served his interests, and he said he did it because his calculation is to keep Gaza separate from the West Bank.
Why did he enter into a truce with?
Because Netanyahu wants to keep the split. He wants to separate Gaza from the West Bank. The whole deal of the century of Trump and Netanyahu is based on one word. They have a nationality law, which is a racist law that specified the rights to determination only for the Jewish people between the river to the Mediterranean. So getting rid of the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza is a must in their strategy.
Even if it means normalizing Hamas?
If it means anything, they want to take Sharon when he had the disengagement from Gaza. Well, he had one single thing in mind, to destroy the prospects of a two-state solution. Because I'll tell you from now, there will never be a state without Gaza, and there will never be a Palestinian state in Gaza. So Netanyahu, as much as you put a strategy, he has a strategy. He wants to keep Gaza separate from the West Bank under any circumstances. And the reason he stopped the negotiations with us in April 23, 2014, is when my colleague Mr. Azzam al-Ahmad signed the Shata agreement in Gaza for reconciliation with Hamas.
Do you think that is the reason, one of the reasons why the Palestinian Authority is being made, or at least made to look more irrelevant?
Well, the Palestinian Authority is an authority that is elected by the Palestinian people, and it's not up to Netanyahu or anybody else to choose leaders of the Palestinians, or for Trump. You know, this film I've seen before, and this broken record I've heard before. I heard President Bush, when Arafat was there, asking for a new leadership, is because Arafat and Abu Mazen and Saeb Erekat and the others were telling the Israelis, we seek peace, but our peace will not be at any cost. Our peace means a fully independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital on the 1967 lines, and a solution to refugees, water, borders, settlement, security, in accordance with the relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. This is it. Now, I cannot stand guards on people's lips. I cannot stand guards in people's emotions. I cannot stand guards in the way people think. But if they want peace, this is what it takes to make peace. Now, the most important ingredient for me in my strategy as a Palestinian Authority, as a PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, is to have my national unity. My national unity depends on Hamas accepting to implement the agreement that was signed in Egypt on October 12, 2017.
What did they offer you a new deal? They say,
we're talking.
Relinquish what you have or elevate us even here. Let Hamas operate in the West Bank.
No, what we're telling them is that once there is a national consensus government. In 2014, that was formed jointly by Hamas.
I get that.
And we want this government to function in Gaza. 6 months into that, the agreement specifies we go to the ballots, to elections, national elections, in the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem. And Hamas may win and take everything through ballots. They don't need to use bullets. We're offering them ballots. And then we offer them, if we get our share, because
you might get what you want, especially after this truce. They'll be like, you know what, all right, let's go to the ballots.
Let's go to the ballot.
Because they think they'll emerge as a more popular group
than
Fatah and the Palestinians.
They did that in 2006. In 1996.
They are more popular now.
No. Listen, in 1996, they stood in the mosques and said elections haram by our religion.
They've evolved. They're a pragmatic group.
Right.
Say they've...
Fine, it's haram. And you may say it's haram. In 2006, it became halal. Okay? And they won the elections. And now, in 2018, they want to go to elections in 2019, halal. They may win the elections. And they can take over. And then if we get our share, as much as we have support, because none of us are not elected. We're all elected also.
Okay, Dr.
All right?
Erekat, what is the way? What is the solution? What is the way forward?
The solution is,
especially given what's happened in the past 48 hours, 72 hours.
The solution
with their success, so-called success in Gaza against the Israelis.
The solution between
Lieberman.
Look. The success is our national unity. As I told you.
But this is the reality.
We are under occupation. In the West Bank, in East Jerusalem,
in Gaza,
and the Gaza Strip. Our salvation, if we want to continue steadfasting, and we will, depends on us. If we don't help ourselves, nobody else will. Nations around us are slaves to their interests. Everybody who wants to serve Palestine know that serving Palestine, that Palestinians need to unite in order to stand tall against Trump and against Netanyahu and against Lieberman and against Bennett and against all of those. This is where it all begins. We need to focus on our national unity. Now,
not fight amongst each other.
Of course, we're wasting our energy. We're a small people, and we should not waste our energy over fighting over what? We're under occupation. There is nothing to fight about other than getting rid of the occupation. And then, in our political life, we're a democracy. No one can cancel the other. No one.
Circumstances, occupation.
No. 2006 circumstances, occupation.
What did
Hamas
Fatah do to break that siege?
Hamas in 2006, under occupation, under siege, whatever, they won the election. And they may run for elections in 2019 and win the elections. And we may win our share, and we may form a coalition government. We're not excluding that. But we need to reconcile. We cannot continue a government in Gaza and a government in the West Bank. We cannot, under any circumstances. This is exactly what Netanyahu wants. The racist nationality law of Mr. Netanyahu that was passed 3 months ago specified from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, Jews have the right to self-determination only. Only Jews. Please understand this. Which meant that the US had to close its consul general that was established in 1844 in Palestine, and had to close the office of the PLO in Washington. Why? Because we're not a people. We don't have rights of determination. We don't deserve to be represented or to be presented. The 2 million people in Gaza must be separate from the West Bank in accordance with the nationality law. Because today, as I speak to you, from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, 51% of the population are me. And 49% of the population are Netanyahu's. So if they get rid of the 2 million Palestinian in Gaza under any circumstances, humanitarian and so on, imagine the US with all its crocodile tears, they cut $304 million of the United Nations Relief and Work Agencies for the refugees. That is spending 75% of it in Gaza because 80% of Gazans are refugees. And then they hold a conference in Washington, Mr. Greenblatt and Kushner, under a humanitarian aid for Gaza. Gaza need electricity and water, and they cut $304 million of this agency, which is not a Palestinian agency on our own, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. If we don't help ourselves, if we don't get our act together, and if we continue the fragmentation Netanyahu wants us to, because Netanyahu now is doing everything in his power. He will cancel his government. He will go through elections, to waste things, to make sure that Gaza continues separate from the West Bank.
And you are saying that that Hamas is playing into this trap.
I hope they will not fall in this trap, because if they fall in this trap, it means the Palestinian national project is destroyed.
But you are...
Because Sharon, when he disengaged from Gaza, he did not have...
But you are fearful that they...
Well, I'm warning them. I'm warning them. I'm warning all...
So what, you think they will?
I'm warning all Palestinians not to fall in this trap.
Not to separate Gaza from the West Bank.
As much as we put a strategy for unity, for liberation, for Palestinian state, for statehood, and so on, and we're succeeding, Israel has a strategy. Gaza must be separated from the West Bank. I'm telling you, on April 23rd, mark my words.
And is this Hamas's strategy as well, now?
They say no, and I hope it's not, and it should not. And I'm urging Hamas to come back and accept to implement the agreement it signed in Cairo on 12th of October 2017. And when we differ, and we differ a lot, economically, politically, women, whatever.
But Hamas also says that, the Palestinian Authority is an enforcer, de facto enforcer for the occupation. Mahmoud Abbas, the PA leadership.
Well, as I told you, I can't stand guards on their lips.
But it's a serious accusation.
But when Mahmoud Abbas stood tall, unlike any other country on earth, and suspended the relations with the United States of America, do you think we went and picked a fight with the US, the superpower? Don't you think that we know that nations are a slave to their interests? Don't you know that we know that there is only superpower on earth? But when Trump moved the embassy and recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, it was Mahmoud Abbas who suspended the relations with the United States. And every Muslim and Arab nations continued and deepened their relations with Trump. So let no one dare criticize us, because we told Trump there is no meaning to have a Palestinian state without East Jerusalem being its capital. And our people with civilians, they're fighting on behalf of all Muslims and Christians and Arabs to defend our holy places in East Jerusalem. So I don't want someone to come and lecture me on the meaning of steadfastness and the meaning of martyrdom and the meaning of wounded and the meaning of maimed, because as I told you, every single Palestinian household has a tragedy. So please don't lecture me on the meaning of nationalism and patriotism.
Dr. Erekat, thank you so much, sir.